Okay, local and global variables. Right, I wanted to look a bit more about what is a local and what is a global variable. Remember, a variable is like a box where you can store a number in programming. You can take that number out and you can put a different number in. Now, I'm going to use a real life example here. I'm going to use a parachute and a hammer. I was going to use the same person where the parachute didn't open, but that was a bit grisly. So just imagine this is a very large hammer. We know that it's the same gravity. Gravity doesn't change and it affects everyone. But we are very different. So the parachute has a lot more air resistance than the hammer. Even though they may weigh the same, this is a very big hammer, as you can probably guess, it's going to fall a lot faster than the parachute is. So let's actually look at this falling, this height. Now for the height I'm going to say this is the y coordinate, where x and y is the up and down, so off they go. And as you can see that the height is different for each one. So let's look at this in real life again. This time I've put a giant ruler to show what the value of y would be as we're going down the screen. Now, to begin with, they're both at the top. The y variable, or the y coordinate, is 100 for each. They're in the same position. And gravity is 9.81. That's the amount affecting it. After a moment, we start to see a difference. The parachute is now, its y variable value is 94. The hammer is 95. But again, gravity is the same. And we see a bit more of that. And finally, after a few moments, the parachute is at 80. It hasn't moved that far, but the hammer is shot down. Its y is radically different. Its value now is 40. That's half of the value of y, 80. But again, the gravity, as we can see, even though these are very different, is exactly the same. So here we have our situation. Is what we're looking at is that gravity stays the same, but the y for those two objects is very different. We call this y a local variable, and the reason we do that is the y is a variable in both the hammer and the parachute, and it means the same thing in these cases. It means the vertical position of that object, but it can be different for each object. Therefore, we call it a local variable. Its value only applies locally to the object it is part of, whereas globally we have gravity, and gravity is the same for both the hammer and the parachute. And both the hammer and the parachute use the same value for gravity or from gravity. And if that value were to change for one, it would change for both. Say if you were to leave the Earth and go to the Moon and give it an atmosphere, etc., you would find that both would fall at a slower rate because gravity had dropped down to a third of its original value. And that's what we call a global value. Now, let's look at something slightly different that you're more likely to come across and calculate on the computer. This is tax. So we've got the chocolate bar, and the price before tax of this chocolate bar is going to be 90p, and we've got the fizzy drink, and the price before tax is going to be 50p, and they're both local values. But we have a global value, which is VAT, value added tax, at 20% of the price before tax, and we can apply that to both the chocolate bar and the fizzy drink. So we now see that the chocolate bar is equal to the price before tax, which is its local variable or local value, plus its tax, which 20% of 90p is 18p, so we get a total of 108 pence. The fizzy drink, the price before tax, is 50p, that's its local variable. The 20%, which is global, as that affects everything else, where we get an extra tax of 10p, therefore we have a total price of 60p. So now if we look at these two examples, the price before tax for both, that's local, that's the variable, and the total for both would be local variable. In fact, the 18p and 10p, that's calculated, but it's calculated from the global variable, which is multiply the local variable by 20%. So we have a global variable of the tax affecting the local variables for both the chocolate bar and fizzy drink. And that is local and global variables.